10 years of work and several successful movie franchises all culminated into Marvel's ambitious Avengers 3: Infinity War. By all accounts, the movie was a massive success, smashing the box office record and rating highly with fans and critics alike. Despite all of this though, there is one thing that I see being discussed a lot and I wanted to address. It is the issue of Thanos' core philosophy. The movie stresses that possessing all 6 Infinity Stones will give Thanos godlike power. Thanos intends to use this power to destroy half of the population of the universe with the snap of his fingers. This got people wondering why, with all of this power, he couldn't just double the resources of the universe instead. There are many answers to this question that aren't directly stated but could be implied. Thanos' goal became cemented in his mind back when the only way to achieve his goal was to manually wipe out half a planet. Creation takes more power than destruction, and the Infinity Gauntlet was nearly destroyed just from that alone. Then his comic counterpoint had a thing with Lady Death that required killing to earn her favour. None of this is mentioned in the movie though, so the debate continues. Something that struck me when I was watching Infinity War was how closely Thanos' goals lined up with the antagonist from my favourite anime, the Anti-Spirals from Gurren Lagann. Thanos witnessed the destruction and suffering caused by overpopulation and vowed to reduce it so that people would never have to fight for resources again. He reasoned that a quick death was better than the constant struggle of war and starvation that he had seen people have to live through on a daily basis. To him it was a case of the greater good because he knew that society didn't have the responsibility to limit itself. The Anti-Spirals discovered that unchecked growth would eventually become too much for the universe to contain and would lead to an apocalyptic event known as the Spiral Nemesis. Just like Thanos, they chose to impose their own will on other sentient races, suppressing them and cutting their ability to expand and evolve. Again, this is a decision for the greater good to save the universe from destruction at the cost of countless innocent lives. The Anti-Spirals also had godlike power, but their method is never questioned in the way that Thanos' is. This is because Gurren Lagann takes the time to set up the threat and also a series of rules that the universe must follow. Now granted, Gurren Lagann has the luxury of explaining things in a 27 series show versus Infinity War's single movie. It is entirely possible that Avengers 4 will give us some answers too, as they're technically parts 1 and 2 of the same story. The fact is though that for how many movies have been leading up to Thanos, the time wasn't taken to establish his philosophy, the threat behind it, or the universal rules at all. Gurren Lagann establishes that all life with evolutionary potential generates a force known as spiral energy. This is strongest in life that has hit a peak such as humans and other sentient intelligent life forms across the stars. This spiral energy is a force of creation and is channeled when fighting. The show then tells us that too much spiral energy will basically create a series of big bangs that will obliterate the universe as we know it, ending all current life. The only way to prevent this is to limit how much spiral energy is produced, and the only way to do that is to suppress the life forms that generate it. We know what the threat is and why the Anti-Spirals take the steps that they do in order to prevent it. These set boundaries that become known to all of the characters also offer the protagonist's perspective and reflection. Simone realises that the Anti-Spirals are correct but still refuses to accept their methods. He has faith that a path will be found that prevents the Spiral Nemesis without having to imprison society, and he accepts the responsibility that this places on his shoulders. He understands what must be done and rejects it. This is never really confronted in Infinity War. The topic boils down to, this guy is trying to kill billions of people, I don't think he should do that, so let's stop him. Nobody has the chance to offer an alternative or even dwell on why Thanos is walking the path that he is. We as an audience were never shown the struggles of overpopulation in any of the movies, and none of the characters experience it either. We don't see the cost of all the rare materials used by the heroes, how scarce they are and what damage is done to obtain them. We don't see food scarcity or the housing crisis. Thanos speaks of it, but it feels like a faraway event without any bearings on anything we know currently. That is exactly what Gurren Lagann does right. We see the same general problem throughout the series at different scales. Firstly, in a small village that can only support a population of 50 people, anytime that number is exceeded, people are selected to leave the village randomly to an inevitable death on the surface. Then we find out that humanity is being forced to stay in these small underground villages because the planet's population limit is set to 1 million humans by the antispirals. If that number is exceeded, then the moon will crash into the planet to wipe it out. The tyrannical Spiral King, who was the antagonist for the first half of the show, goes from heartless villain to a fallen warrior trying his best to keep the dregs of humanity alive in the face of their own lust for growth. When he is overthrown, the population inevitably exceeds its limits and the moon begins to fall. The people turn against those who freed them. Knowing that the Earth will be destroyed, Rossiu, once a boy from the village mentioned before, evacuates what few people he can fit onto a spaceship and plans to escape the planet to save those that he can, knowing full well that all of them left behind will be killed. When Simone's will to fight against the odds succeed, Rossiu is overcome by his failures. He only ever tried to do what was best for humanity as a whole, but in the process abandoned his own humanity to achieve it, forgetting the value of singular human life. This conflict drives him to attempt suicide and is a massive moment of character growth. After almost being crushed by the responsibility of all of humanity, he has the cathartic line, "I want to feel the weight of just one human life," when his love interest is forced to sit on his lap due to limited space in a cockpit. This small act shows the growth and reevaluation of his personal philosophy and shows the value of a single life now. Infinity War needed these little moments to be woven through it or the earlier movies to really strengthen Thanos' position and ideals. Instead it kinda came out of nowhere and it doesn't feel reasoned out enough to cast doubt in the heroes' minds. Statements like "we don't barter lives" feel like opposition to Thanos' worldviews, but it's never taken far enough to feel like a battle of ideology as well as of fists. All in all, while Thanos' philosophy is such a strong concept, it's carried out in too shallow a way to really provide the impact that is required for such a monumental character and scene. And don't get me wrong, I loved the movie and love Thanos as a character, and that's why this little bit, I can kind of see why the community is picking holes with it. For such an important and integral part of who Thanos is as a character and the impact that this philosophy has had on the Marvel Cinematic Universe's continuity, its characters, it really needed the time to just expand on it a little bit more and to let the characters offer up alternatives to fight against it philosophically, ideologically, as well as physically. And there you have it. That is why Gurren Lagann succeeds with its population philosophy, while Infinity War stands on shaky grounds.
Simone, I don't feel so good.
Thanos, you bastard!